Welcome back to Tips Over Tea. This is episode 14. I am Nicole, your host. We had the great pleasure of speaking with Dr. Tamara Yakaboski today. We spoke about her G.R.O.W methodology with respect to stepping boldly into who you are and breaking all the rules that you grew up with. Okay, maybe not grew up with, but yeah, just becoming a rule breaker and living your purpose. So if that sounds like you and something you'd like to learn how to do or know someone who does, make sure you guys grab your tea and listen in. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 14 of Tips Over Tea. I'm so excited to have Dr. Tamara Yakaboski here. Coolest last name. Tamara, thanks for joining today. I am excited to introduce you to the guests. And as you know, I hop right into it because 30 minutes just flies by. I wanted to share with everyone your G.R.O.W methodology, just reading more about you and learning more about you. If you would mind, would you share with us what that's all about?
Yeah, thanks. Well, first off, thanks for having me here. I'm really excited to connect with folks and with you. And so in my work, I think a lot lately about this idea of like the disconnection that we have. We live so much in our heads. And so in working with folks, specifically women identified folks, it was like, how do we get out of our heads, get back into our bodies and our emotions and connect with ourselves and connect with nature and community, right? Like these are all the pieces that create this sense of belonging and satisfaction and joy. Mm-hmm. So when I was thinking about like, well, how do I tell people the sort of integrated way that I like to work with them? So G.R.O.W is ground into self and purpose, release mindsets and beliefs, orient through body and nature, and weave connection and community. And part of that also is, as you'll know about me, my number one favorite activity would be gardening or just getting my hands in dirt. And so I think about things through sort of this nature as metaphor, but also literal nature connection to help people right. These are the things that matter. Like, what's our purpose? Who are we? Are we connected to our, our, like I think about like our core of like our heart and our gut, and then using our mind as a tool rather than our mind as like guiding everything. And so that's where the releasing the mindsets and beliefs that we take on from a whole lot of sources. So I love the idea of like, we release that so that we become rule breakers, so that we can actually live our joy. And, the body, nature, community is so critical, especially like on this side of the pandemic. I think we've seen even more that connection and communities is so critical for happiness and satisfaction, and also like giving and receiving and reciprocity. And so that's a whole lot. I could just keep talking, so I'll stop there on that.
No, that's okay. Keep talking is good. I will definitely agree with the whole aspect of community. People don't realize how healing it can be. Like, especially if one of your love languages is to give and you have no one to give to because you're by yourself, because we haven't been able to connect with people. I mean, of course you can give more than just something. You can give energetically and compliments and love, but sometimes people like to give physical things. And I imagine like when we didn't have the opportunity to connect with people physically, it was really tough on that population. So tell me, how do you work with your clients in this? Like, what is a process? Do you walk them through? How does it start?
Yeah. It's fairly organic and individualized, but I like to sort of think about first, like, what are the biggest things that people are dissatisfied with their life? And sometimes, like, I want to connect back to what you just said about giving. Oftentimes, women identified folks or people who are nurturers or empathic, like they want to give, yet there's not this mechanism of receiving and like either receiving or an ability or tools to refuel. So we look a lot at what is radical self-care, right? And radical self-care is the actually comes from some amazing feminists and women well before me, Audre Lorde, our current, bell hooks as well, of like radical self-care is about self-preservation, but also it's community, right? It's we give to ourselves in order to give to others, and making sure like we are connecting with folks that give us back something, maybe energetically or support or whatever that may be. But to your question about how then does that work? So it's looking at like, what are your self-care tools? And more often than not, it's what are your limiting beliefs around self-care, right? Like I just did this workshop last week on, it was called, I have a Grow Boldly series that I go with each season. And so for the summer season, we looked at how do we reset and restore our creativity? And creativity, the idea that we are all naturally born creative. And I don't mean like, I'm an amazing artist. I mean, you could be, I don't know. But like, we all have things that we are creative about. And it may just be like, we are creative in cooking. We are creative in the way we garden, whatever your thing is.
Yeah.
So like refueling that. So often it's the limiting belief of like, oh, I can't like give myself 30 minutes a day because that is indulgent, right? So often we have these limiting beliefs that we're not doing the self-care. So we look at like where you're dissatisfied, what your tools and beliefs are around radical self-care, and what do we need to shift there. And then part of the radical self-care also is how are we integrating mindful techniques, right? So maybe you're really into meditation, or maybe you don't want to do that, but you like to journal, or you like to do something else that just really brings you into your body, and into the moment. So often, we're go, 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 or we're stressed, or we have, kids, pandemic puppies, partners, whatever, like wanting our attention. So sometimes we just need to like, right, take it down a notch. And then also like with nature piece of like, okay, what are the nature-based activities that would be restorative for you? And maybe, and that really depends. Last week in the workshop, we talked about cultivating the practice of a sit spot. And that comes a lot from like meditative Buddhist roots. And yet it's also this beautifully simplistic thing of find one location outside. Maybe it's in a yard, maybe it's a patio, maybe it's a park near you, depending on your living situation, and you return to it regularly. Maybe it's daily, maybe it's weekly, and you just go and you be and you observe. You could journal, you could meditate, or you could just sit and watch. And then you get to sort of connect in with the cycles of nature. You get to connect in with the beautiful metaphors that nature provides us, that then allow us to go in this deeper, like, oh, what does this pine cone like mean to me? Like a little prickly, but inside the prickle is like a seed. So like we can connect with those pieces. So we work on those pieces. We also look at sort of the personal and professional. Often having a background as a higher education professor and administrator up until a month ago, I work a lot with professional women or women who are returning as grad students, maybe changing careers and these sorts of things. So we work a lot with like, what is your purpose now versus, your purpose maybe when you were 18? Because we cycle, right? We cycle and we transform. And so what is your purpose? And connecting that purpose into heart and gut, right? Like this is like our inner knowing to me. And then how do we use our brain in our career to like bring that forward, right? So that's that community and connection piece of like, when you're connected to your purpose and then your gifts, you can then bring it forward and make an impact on your community, whatever that means for you. And so those are kind of all the pieces that we work through. And it's kind of, it's a combination of, career counseling, limiting beliefs, depth psychology, Jungian, Carl Jung sort of work, mindful. I have a background in yoga and meditation, so it's like mindfulness practices coming in. Oh, Nikki, last week I just did a wilderness therapy training, 5 days in the middle of like the wilderness of Colorado, hanging out with therapists, just like practicing exercises, doing our own self work, and then like learning these other tools. So it's like that's coming in. I'm finishing up a training on climate change and health. So as an adaptation practitioner. So like I want to help people also connect their purpose and impact to climate action and justice work, right? Like, how do we heal ourselves, our community, earth, and like all of these pieces?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not a clear-cut thing. It's like bringing together these pieces that are so integrated and specific to each person, but also there are some universal trends and patterns that I think we experience in this like human journey.
Yes, absolutely. Which is where community really also plays a role. Like we can all relate to some of the trials and tribulations and wanting to grow, and that nature thing sounds amazing. I want to hear more about that. Sounds like you might do a retreat yourself someday.
Oh yeah, yes. I think about these things. So last night coming again this side of the pandemic, getting together with people, safely outside. And I gathered a group of women in my local area that I'm like, oh, like, you're amazing, you're amazing, you're amazing, you're amazing. Let's all come together. And so we actually, to sort of talk about like, what do we want our role to be with climate action for our community and climate justice. And so I don't know if like, so this book is amazing. This is like this new anthology of these like kick-ass scientists, authors, poets, artists across the US, all about like, how do we find hope and action within like the intersectional like the overlapping identities and the privileges and racism and sexism and all of these pieces and climate, and then how do we like as just like regular folks without like an expertise in it, how do we do something? And so like I love that. So we kind of just met to sort of, and it was also Juneteenth, so we sort of talked about the meaning of our history in the country of racism, and needing to do a lot of really deep healing and self-work, especially for white identified folks, and then how do we combine that with action on climate? So what was the question?
I don't know, we're just talking. We're just talking. No, I was just really absorbing everything that you're sharing. So I don't think I really asked the question. Just kind
okay, because I'm like, sometimes like I get so excited, I can just like, let me just word idea vomit of like randomness that in my head it connects, but not actually.
It really does, because you work with women on that, and that's an aspect of it. So it sounds like it's well, one, you're living what you teach, so it shows that, and you can, it shows also how you can expand what people are learning from you into their own community, which is what you're wanting them to do too. Anyway, so it connected. This was
I know. And so the whole G.R.O.W methodology was a way to try to like summarize that.
Yeah.
Circling back to like where we started, right? It was like trying to get that kind of to someone who's maybe new to me or new to pieces of it, or maybe just new to the connection. Because a lot of times people are just like, oh yeah, okay, now I see this connection of like, I talk about like climate feminism, which the book sort of put together for me, and I saw these things combined. I was just like, oh, right. And then the nature-based therapeutic work comes in of like, when we're connected into our body, into nature, we feel this, right? Like and then we feel the urgency and the desire and the need to do this healing work in our society and in our, our systems and earth. So we've got, right. So we've got to get back in.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's beautiful about healing from within is, one, you show other people what it looks like to heal, right? Yourself. Because I've had a really good friend. I've gotten really good. I've seen it play out, like what self-care really looks like watching him remove himself from situations that were like the energy. He's like, yeah, I can't, I'm not doing that. But just showing what self-care really looks like. Oh, Marlene said, vomit away.
Thanks. Well, yeah, we talked like last week with the creativity piece, our workshop, we talked a lot about boundaries. And actually that was one of our activities we did one day, is like, okay, this is the energy you want to hold for the summer. Now you got to write some clear, like really specific boundaries. And that's where I love watching people get really uncomfortable with like, that's going to cause conflict. I'm like, yeah, probably. But good conflict, right? Good conflict and conversation within, and maybe with a partner or like whoever's in your work or whoever's in your life, or, puppies. But like, you got to create those really clear boundaries to have that self-care and that self-work, and just to have that time for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I always say, like, what you allow will continue. So if you continue to allow people to come past and through those boundaries, it keep going. For one, they probably would have no clue that it's intrusive, so to speak. So they're not doing it intentionally. They just don't know. Charlotte said, absolutely, self-care is vital. If you're not healthy in your mind and body, your creations will suffer. Very true. Very true.
Yeah.
You're thinking.
I'm like, I could go a lot of different ways, but I'll just like pause.
Go
and take a breath. Have a sip of my iced tea.
But yeah, so establishing that we don't really think, like, we'll try to do some self-care things, but like I feel like that's the foundation of it, because giving other people boundaries gives yourself boundaries to work within too, and not boundaries in a restrictive way, but boundaries in I gotta take care of me. This is important enough to schedule, so to speak. Even if it's not scheduled, even if you do haphazard, like I'm gonna go not haphazard, but consistent. Like just go stand outside. Like I was just before this call, just went and stood in the yard for a little bit, just because I just like, give me some sun, give me some grounding. But yeah.
And I told you when we hopped on before we went live of like, I just got back from walking the dog and like checking out people's amazing flowers in their yard, and I got all of these ideas about my own yard redesign, and like, that's a beautiful flower, I want to have that in my life every day. I was thinking about, I just had to look up on my Facebook page. I shared this quote. It's from a book called The Creative Habit. And it says, creativity is an act of defiance. You're challenging the status quo. You're questioning accepted truths and principles. You're asking 3 universal questions that mock conventional wisdom. Why do I have to obey the rules? Why can't I be different? And why can't I do it my way? And that, I think, is self-care and boundaries, right? Like, why can't I do it my way? Like, why do I have to obey these rules, right? Because they're just made up. And as women especially, so often we grew up in an environment from maybe families, and if not families, educational system for sure, that is all about often pleasing, silencing our needs, and going with what other people want. So often we get to this place then where we're like overworked, in our careers and at home, and even with ourselves, because we don't have boundaries and we don't even know how to do them. So when we start to talk about boundaries around self-care, that's why it gets so uncomfortable, because it's all these ingrained messages of like, you have, you should, I talk about like shoulding yourselves, right? Like, and I like it because when you say it quickly, it sounds like shitting yourself. Oh, I didn't ask you if I can cuss. Oh, sorry. You can bleep me. But right, like we shit on ourselves all the time.
Yeah.
With these shoulds, right? Like I should. And I'm like, no, you shouldn't. Like, what do you want to write your own rules about and do it?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Right. But like the norming and the social messages are so strong. And it's really just to make sure other people don't feel uncomfortable.
Right.
But I'm all about like, let's make them feel uncomfortable because they got like shit to work out if they, to work through if they're feeling uncomfortable with what you're doing.
Right. That's a them thing, not you.
Totally. Like, yeah, whose business is this? Mine or theirs? Their opinion of me is their business. I don't, like, I don't care.
Exactly.
Or I shouldn't care.
There's an instance when should is a good one.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, because it makes you question, like, why do I care? That's a good time for some inner work too.
Totally. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And letting that go. And that's why, like, when I created this program, I decided to call it Grow Boldly, because I think like that's what it feels like. It's like, it is bold to step into the world as yourself, with boundaries and self-care. Right? Like that is a rebellious action that we need to do more of.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's definitely not something highlighted at any point. You just kind of start to figure it out when you get tired. You're like, something's got to give.
Yeah. I'm like, how many breakdowns do I have to like literally? And I think about like my last 6 years of a journey, and it's like, how many breakdowns do I need to have? I'm like, oh, there's a physical one. There's an emotional one. There's a mental one. Oh, look, we're back to this one. And it's just like, okay, let's just keep, this is like my pep talk to me of like, let's just keep shifting. Let's just keep working. Okay, you need some downtime. You need some rest. It's not always work. Sometimes the work is the rest. I had somebody last week on the workshop say, she scheduled herself a nap on her lunch break. I'm like, yes, put that in your work schedule. Just say like, blocked for a lunch meeting, and then go sit in a hammock and take a nap. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially right now. The weather's decent. Oh man, the weather. I love the sun.
Yeah.
So is there so we have about 8 minutes left. Is there anything that you would like for someone, like the folks who weren't able to catch this live, they'll come back and watch it. So is there something you want to leave them with? Let me just read what Charlene says real quick. Charlene said, "You're so right. Boundaries are important. You need to have some you time." And I love the hammock nap. I do too.
Yeah, there's somebody shared with me, I guess there's a napministry.com. It's like there's a movement about napping, and because it is a radical piece in this country and our society that really I don't know, like we see it. I'd be so curious about if you see this in your work too, of like early pandemic, there was like a slowdown for many, not all. There were plenty of frontline folks who didn't get the slowdown.
Yeah.
And then coming into, after the first summer of the pandemic, it almost felt like employers were ready, like, okay, it's been like 4 months. Let's get ramped back up. And it almost feels like we ramped even higher than we were before. But we're also seeing people question this because they had that pause. Yeah. And so we're seeing people leave the workforce. We're seeing people make radical career changes. Yeah. I mean, I did that like myself a month ago. I like to say I put myself in early retirement from my academic job after 14 years because I'm like, that's no longer aligned with my values and the way I want to work with folks. Yeah, and so we're seeing a lot of people shift, and we're seeing people find like that fulfillment through, trends we've seen go up. We've seen, camping, hiking, nature-based activities go up. We've seen gardening in your yard or your patio container gardening go up. We've seen puppies, and I think part of that is that like we know from research that petting animals and that close connection, right? It releases, love hormones and good feeling chemicals. And
Yeah.
so we've seen people create awareness. And so it's this opportunity to like, in a way, I know, the pandemic has brought some real shitty things, and also an opportunity to like, what do you want your next however many years, days, weeks to be?
Yeah.
Right? And
Yeah.
how do we live that and be that well and in a way that like fosters community and connection and goodness for those around us?
Yeah.
I don't know. It just like it. I feel this movement of like this big opportunity.
Mm-hmm. It is. It has the being forced to stop or slow down for most. It has given pause. Like, what am I doing with my life? Like, a lot of people are having a hard time going back to work now that some employers are like, okay, it's time come back to work.
Yeah.
They're like surveying people, but I appreciate the bosses who are like, we can split it up. Like, you can do telework some days and
Mhm.
office work some days. The autonomy is really a big, like, if you're going to be in a job, and autonomy is very helpful in staying motivated and committed to that job. Being able to
Yeah.
create your own schedule, because that's a form of self-care too. Like, you're feeling more in control of your life, and you can create a schedule that works with your self-care ritual values in the morning or evenings or whatever. So
Mhm. And it's also great or better for the planet too, right? When we're not all stuck commuting and driving and doing these pieces, we're
mhm.
able to maybe go on walks at lunchtime, right? So we're able to do these things that are really just healthier. And it is this invitation of creativity of like, what do you need
Mhm.
in your life? How do you set up and this is a conversation I've had with folks too lately, and going back to work and having employers be like, oh, why are you back 5 days a week? And we're like, okay, well, how do you enter in those conversations? And how do you know exactly what you're asking for and why, so
Yeah.
that you're crafting a response to the employer who's like, we all need to be visible and seen.
Mhm.
Why?
Mhm.
Because we all need to be visible and seen. Why? Why? But you can actually bring it back to like, what are the company's values
Yeah.
and what's my work goal or our collective work goal for me? And how do I then take those pieces and present to my supervisor or my company why this version is the best at getting me to meet my performance outcomes, or whatever the language
Yeah.
is, right? Like we can craft this, and yeah, sure, they're going to be like assholes, no doubt, because there are plenty of people who have also like employers who have dug their heels in because they don't want to shift, right? Like
Mhm.
the status quo is comfortable.
Mhm.
So how do we kind of like work within that and like edge your way or like nudge your way towards what you need?
Mhm.
And maybe that's within your current situation. Maybe it means a career change.
Mhm.
Like I met when I was at that wilderness training last week, there were 5 out of 14 of us who were, 30s, 40s, who were just like, I just like pivoted. I'm going to become a therapist and I'm going to do like nature-based work. And so there's like completely pivoted.
Mhm.
Awesome. All
Mhm.
right. Well, how do we get that going, right? If that's like your thing and that's how you want to pivot for the next 20 years of work or 10 years or 40, whatever,
Mhm.
um, how do we do that? And how is that in alignment with like your purpose here on this earth?
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. I love it. That's brave, and I'm excited for those ladies.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And you
Yeah,
too.
ladies and one guy. There,
That's awesome.
right? Like, but it is, right? It's the bravery, it's the boldness. Like,
Mm-hmm.
are you ready to step in and step up to yourself and do it?
Mm-hmm.
And those like the transformational, like radical transformation, like this is that's who I love those people, right? Like, let's like get in there, go deep, and like shift it.
Mm-hmm. And I will say, if you're not there yet, it's no judgment. Like,
No, like, yeah, these are
right.
seeds, right? Like going back to that nature metaphor,
Yeah.
planting seeds. And honestly, like my radical transformation of who I am now, it was about a 4-year journey.
Yeah.
So like when I say like, let's get in and do it, I don't mean like next month, whoosh. I mean, maybe, but I
Yeah.
mean, that wasn't me. Like mine was about a 4-year thing, right? It's like the seed planting, and it's just like, keep going, keep growing, keep nurturing.
Yeah.
And I know we're at time.
It's okay.
Things happen.
Happens. Any final thoughts for those who catch this after the live is shown?
I would, if this resonates, I would love to connect. I do some free workshops. I also work one-on-one. I'm going to start some online courses. If you're in the Colorado area, I'm going to do some in-person ones. Either way, I do a free strategy call that you can sign up for, and we can just sort of talk about where you are and where you want to be. And that can be awesome too. So people just, reach out, connect, or share your thoughts and your ideas and your resources. I also love like the co-sharing of info.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, because we can't know everything.
And just get outside. Go outside.
Yes. Charlene said, so well spoken. There's always a flip side to a negative. COVID has brought me to realize pivoting my platform is healthy and in alignment with my core values. So thank you very much. Thank you for sharing. I really appreciate that you hung out with us today and shared your thoughts and whatnot. If you're catching this after we finish airing, I invite you, please connect with Tamara. Her information will be in the comment section on the YouTube page. She would love to connect with you. If you know this could resonate with someone, please share. And on my YouTube channel, please subscribe, share, like, all that.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Just connect people.
Yes.
To goodness.
That is my ultimate goal. Like, there's no one way to doing everything, and just exposing folks to other folks.
Yeah. Well, Nikki, thank you for your awesomeness and sharing amazingness and connecting.
Absolutely my pleasure. All right, everyone, we will see you next Sunday. I hope you have an amazing rest of your weekend. Take care and ciao.
Bye.
Thanks again for listening in. Make sure you like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified whenever we upload a new video or go live. Be sure to share this with anyone who could use it. If you want to get in touch with Tamara, her information is in the description below, and we'll see you next time.